For all the latest on the SaWGuy podcast, be sure to subscribe and don't forget that bell icon. Welcome to the SaWGuy podcast. As always, y'all know, I am Dios de la SaWGuy. And today we're having a fiesta here. And what better way to start off a fiesta with episode 59, Tremors 2 Aftershocks. So without further ado, let's get this shit started.
Hello, and welcome to the SaWGuy podcast.
My reign of terror was legendary.
You stutter, bitch.
I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare, huh?
You opened it. We came.
Oh, yes. There will be blood.
Hey, oh!
Now I know what you're thinking. Wait, Mr. SaWGuy, you did episode 7 on Tremors already. And that I did. But you know, episode 7 was the whole Tremors franchise. And I felt like Tremors 2 didn't get enough love, and 3 and 4, and then the rest out of the series. I mostly discussed about the first Tremors because, you know, that's one of my favorites. But with Tremors 2, I will have to say this. This is one of my favorite sequels of any horror franchise. Because it was the fact that it was a sequel done so well. The story was great, and even though you only had a few returning characters, they kind of, you know, spun it off in a way where it's like, oh, this person's not coming back because, you know, they're going through a divorce, you know, with Burt Gummer. Or the fact that Val actually married Rhonda. And it was just like, holy shit, this is a pretty cool story. But with Tremors 2, I've always enjoyed, because it was one of those films that wasn't supposed to happen. And because of the fact that us horror fans, we love the first one so much, we made this sequel happen. It was back in the fucking 90s too. Of all things, you know, before the internet, before they did drawings, before they did any tweets and things like that. So with that being said, it's kind of amazing how this, you know, sequel spun off the rest of the franchise. And, you know, you have a really great story of not only do the Graboids go underground and they, you know, they're underground worms and shit, but they evolve, and it was like, holy shit, you know? They may evolve into these little Shrieker things, but they fucking evolve, and it's like, holy shit. With Tremors 2, what you probably don't know about, it's actually written and directed by the original director and writer, S.S. Wilson. And not only that, this film was actually released in 1996, and it went straight to VHS. They didn't do, you know, straight to movie theater or anything like that. But what's crazy is that they filmed this in 1994, and when they got the budget was only $4 million, because originally it was supposed to be $17 million. They were going to have Reba McEntire come back, and they were going to have Kevin Bacon. Well, Kevin Bacon dropped out so he could do Apollo 13, you know, we all know about that film. And Reba McEntire, you know, she was still a big country singer, and she was doing a tour, and she didn't want to take a break off of it. So, you know, the movie studio came back and said, well, no Kevin Bacon, no Reba McEntire, we're going to pull this back a little bit. And that's what they did. You know, they had originally $17 million, but for $4 million, holy shit. I mean, that's, you know, that's not a chump change, of course, but the fact that they did this whole story in $4 million, especially with the props and how they, you know, they reused a lot of the Graboids, but the puppeteering and the little CGI here and there, I mean, yeah, it's typical 90s, they had to. And not only that, it plays off that whole aspect of less is more, the whole old school Hitchcock method. And it built a lot of suspense. Now, I know you guys could probably think that this film is a sci-fi /horror comedy. I believe it as a true horror film because it's a continuation of the original story. And yeah, there's some slapstick comedy in there here and there, but so was the original, you know? And it still had that charm with it. And as I do in every episode, I'm going to break down the whole movie for you, why it's so special, and throw a little bit more tidbits out there, because as I was researching for this episode, I was just blown away. I was just like, holy shit, so they had this film shelved for 2 fucking years before they released it? You know, it's amazing that this sequel actually went through, because in 1994, you didn't have Twitter, you didn't have anything to voice your opinion as much. And the fact that the fans beat down the drum as test audience and said, hey, we want this film. And they finally released it. You know, it's amazing. It's mind-blowing to me. Like, holy shit, they weren't even going to do this one. But anyways, with Tremors 2, the movie starts off where, you know, you have the typical music playing in the background, you know, like the country, I guess you could say Western style music, you know, it starts playing that. And then all of a sudden, you see this dude where he's just running. And it says that it's in Mexico. And this guy's running, through this oil refinery. Then he jumps up on this bar, and then of course you see the Graboid just coming through. It's like, holy shit, the Graboid's right there. Don't fucking move, dude. What does he do? He freaks out when he's sliding through, this bar that's right there, I guess, this pipe. And he starts jumping on top of these different barrels. And he thinks he's gonna get away. It's like, no, get up on the fucking roof, dude, come on. And eventually he slows down because, the Graboid starts coming faster and faster, and then starts hearing the sound. All these barrels and shit are flying. He falls off the barrel, and then he's on the ground too damn long. And it's like, get the fuck up, dude. And sure enough, a Graboid pops out and he's screaming, ah! Ah! And then, I guess it snaps his back or something because you can hear bones crack. And it pulls him down, and then the suspense music ends. And it's like, oh shit, they're gonna open it with that? Damn. So the second one automatically gets you hooked in, thinking like, oh shit, there's a Graboid still floating around over there, right? And, and how the hell did he get to Mexico? And that's one of the plot holes in this film is like, all of the Graboids were in Nevada, so how the fuck did they get out there in Mexico? Then in the next scene, it shows Earl Bassett from the original one. It shows him like grunting and then fighting, then he's like thrown to the ground, and then he's like, all right, Wildfire, we need to get you and Susie together. We need to get you to make some big birds. And, he's swinging his rope and everything. And I thought it was pretty cool because it's a callback to the original one, how he said he was a rodeo champion and shit. And, he throws a rope and then he gets pulled away and he's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Comes to find out he has an ostrich. And they're not mating because, the underlying secret is that they're both male. And they kind of pointed out because when I was researching for this, they said, oh yeah, it's two males. And it's like, well, how do you know that? And they said it's because the Adam's apple or something on their neck that shows that it's a difference between male and female. And so as he's, getting up and dusting himself off, he sees this fucking taxi coming. And this guy's like, Earl Bassett, right? He's like, yeah. And so, the taxi driver and this other guy come out. And the guy, he introduces himself as Ortega. And, I guess he's like this manager of this big oil refinery and everything in Mexico. And he tells him, he goes, hey, I tried to reach out to your buddy and, he disapproved of it, but I wanted to reach out to you because you guys are, good experts on everything and you guys know how to hunt these things. He's like, hunt these things? And he tells him that, we had a few of our workers killed by these underground monsters. And then, Earl scoots up and he's like, Graboids. And he's like, yeah. He goes, you want someone to go Graboid hunting? And he's like, yeah. And then he gets pissed and he goes in his trailer. That's when Ortega tells him, he's like, well, we tried to get out there to Senor McGee. And, he's telling him, he goes, yeah, sure. He goes, Val married a good woman. Why does he want to die, Which ties in a lot of the stuff from the first one that Val actually married Rhonda. And it was like, oh, shit. So they tied up a lot of loose ends in the first 5 minutes. And as he's, in his trailer, they're pounding on his door, and the taxi driver wants to talk to him. And he introduces himself as Grady. And, he's telling him, he's like, well, yeah, you come in. He's sitting there, he cracked open a beer, and he's seen all the Graboid shit. And I guess they made like a Graboid game. They got famous after it. And then, they start talking about a Reeboks commercial where they're running in the desert. And I was like, oh shit, so that's pretty cool. So they never implied how long it was between the first one and the second one. But obviously there's been some time, probably a couple years, because I know the original one was in 1990. This was filmed in 1994, but not released until 96. So it's about a 4-year difference if they're playing off of that. And so as they're talking, that's when Earl says, hey, I should have got a lawyer. They made a shitload of money on this game, and, I blew all my money on this. And then that's when Grady's like, well, they're willing to offer you $50,000 a worm. And he's like, you know how mean these suckers are? He's like, no. And that's when he starts screaming at his ostrich, I spent all my money on goddamn Big Bird and his scrawny girlfriend. And then that's when he finally, talks to him calm. And Grady tells him, hey, they're paying you $50,000 for each worm, and the Mexican army will give you whatever you want. A stick of dynamite, light it, boom, 50 G's. And that's what he tells him. Maybe this is your big second chance. And then, he comes out of the trailer, finishes his beer, chugs it, and then all of a sudden he throws it out. He goes, Senor Ortega, you got yourself a deal. And then Grady kind of says, steps in, and he goes, and I'm going with him too. And he's like, oh, sí, muy bueno, muy bueno. I apologize, my Spanish isn't really good. I practiced a lot for this episode for you guys, so go easy on me a little bit. And it shows Earl talking to Grady, and he's looking at him. He goes, what the hell? He goes, I don't even know you. And he goes, well, here, I'll introduce you to myself. I live in a crappy apartment, I drive a taxi, etc., etc. Look, you're gonna need a partner, and not many people are willing to do this. He goes, I'll do anything for you, man. Carry your luggage, serve you coffee, light fuses, And then, Earl looks at him. He goes, yeah, maybe you might come in handy. And he's like, all right. He goes, when they're eating you, they give me a chance to get away. I was like, oh, shit, So there's a little bit of dark humor in this. Then it shows that they load up in the old school blue Jeep Gladiator truck that they had from the first film. And I was just like, oh, shit, another callback, right? They're in the truck and they're driving, Earl and Grady. And as they're driving down to Mexico, they brought back the old school rock, paper, scissors. Earl, he used to do that a lot with Val in the first one. And, they play rock, paper, scissors for the last soda. And he's like, rock cuts through paper. I win. He fucks with it. And then all of a sudden he cracks over the soda. And they're still driving to Mexico. And they finally get to this refinery. And as they come out, they meet another guy. His name's Pedro. Because they only have like 3 or 4 workers working at the refinery. And, they start... Back in the day, man, you didn't have Google Translator like you do now off your phone and shit, and you can talk and everything like that. So they pull out a Spanish book, and, Pedro's talking to him in Spanish. He's like, hola, ¿qué pasó? And they're looking through the book like, ¿dónde está Ortega? And he's like, Ortega, sí! Yeah, and he calls him over. And then that's when, they meet up with Ortega. And, that's when he tells them, hey, you guys made good time. And, he's like, let me show you some of the gear. And, oh, by the way, we're offering to double the amount if you can catch one alive. And then Earl's freaking out like, alive? You ever seen one of these things? And he's like, fuck, I knew I shouldn't have come down here, And that's when they were looking at all the gear and everything. Then they're introduced to another character. Her name is Kate. She's played by Helen Shaver. And what I like about Helen Shaver, she's done a lot of horror films in the past. She was in the Amityville horror movies. And she was in one of the other Poltergeist films. But it's pretty cool, and she's got some horror background in her, and she's in this film. I was like, oh shit, I know her. Well, anyways, I guess she's like one of the scientist researchers there at the oil refinery. And Earl, he's, love struck, I guess, like, damn, she's hot looking, right? They made her look like a babe in this film, especially with the Wranglers and everything and the bandana. So, I mean, he was checking her out. And then eventually, she introduces herself and everything like that. They go to the cantina to go and get something to eat, and they meet another guy. His name's Julio. He's the guy who was setting up the seismographs, or I guess you could say the seismic readings. And, in the 90s, technology was there, but not really, so they had to put everything on full old school TV screen monitors to watch this ship. And he set up the seismograph meters, so that way they can measure the vibrations in the ground and see if they can catch a graboid. After that, they start, it's nighttime at this point. They start going over plans, Earl and Kate, they start talking about things and hey, you scared? And she goes, yeah, shit, yeah, I'm scared. And they go through the map of where, all the graboids were at. And then Grady comes in and he tries to tell him, look, hey, I made this train. He's being all fucking loud. He's like, I'm gonna go put this in the truck. So they go and they load up all their shit in the truck. Julio talks to him. And that's when he says, well, hey, this is none of my business, but you don't want to take the whole army of Mexico with you? And he's like, no. And then he tells them that they're trying to be basically the bait and try to lure him out so they can blow him up. And it's very reminiscent to the first one, towards the ending where they, throw the bombs out there, they pull it in, and then boom. What's cool about this one is that now they're actually hunting for him. So they show that they're in the truck. They reach out to this little alluvial hill and everything like that. And they, they stop. And Grady, they switch drivers. Grady tells him, I thought they can't go through hills. He goes, I said they can't go through rock. These hills are alluvial. And he's like, oh, alluvial. That's that dingleberry in the back of your throat, huh? And then Earl's just not even laughing, just looks at him straight. He goes, hey, you want to hunt graboids? You better know geology. Hey, you drive. I'm looking at this sizable jigger thing. And, that's when they finally go out to their first graboid hunt, right? So they're driving around being all loud, and then that's when they're like, stop! So they stop in the middle of the road, and this time they do something a little different with it. They hook up an RC car with dynamite and set everything up with a detonator, and they're driving it through. And eventually the graboid takes it, and then they blow him up. Boom! And they're like, oh shit! 50 G's! 50 G's! And, like in the first one, all the splatter and everything came on him, and they had Earl had an umbrella, and it was funny because it's like this kid one. And, he's holding this umbrella and shit, and then all of a sudden it's slapping everything and slaps Grady. And then he looks at him and he goes, told ya! He goes, oh, I forgot. And then he does the umbrella and it was already too late. Then they did this whole music dialogue where it shows that they're blowing up graboids left and right. Boom, 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 boom. And it was pretty badass, because you think that they're taking them all out. And then all of a sudden, they're sitting there, they're having, I guess, lunch one day, and they're taking a break or whatever. And then all of a sudden, Grady leaves the radio on the ground. Well, this Graboid eats the radio. Then it's the next day, and then they get a Graboid, they blow it up and everything, and then they start talking about, hey, what are you gonna do with your money? And Earl's like, oh, I'm gonna invest it, even at 5%. I'm looking pretty good. He had an old school calculator and shit, like calculated everything. It was the 90s. So anyways, I guess their umbrella, they flew off the truck or whatever. And then all of a sudden, that's when he went to go and chase after it. And Grady's telling Earl that, what he wants to do with his money is that he wants to make an amusement park, And he's like, oh, it's a vision, Earl. Vision. And then Earl's like, get off the damn ground. Get off the ground. Because it shows that this freaking Graboid's coming super fast. Right in the middle. And the monitor would beep as it got closer. That's what I thought was pretty cool. Kind of like sonar. And then the Graboid pops out. He's like, oh, shit. He jumps in the truck. The Graboid goes down. And then he's like, you see the size of those things? And it grabbed the fucking chain that he put on the back. And then they're all like, oh, no. He snagged the chain. And this is where it kind of gets a little comedic, but it's kind of fucking funny. The Graboid, he grabs the chain, and it starts pulling the truck to the side. And then Grady's freaking out like, no fucking way they're that strong. And then Earl's like, God damn it, not again. So he's getting to the truck, and he's trying to start it, and then trying to drive off. And, these old school Jeep trucks, man, they have, a manual transmission. So, I mean, their fucking sticks are like this tall and shit. So he's like, and then he's trying to hold the brakes, and it's pulling him. And that's when it starts pulling him backwards all the way through around. And then Grady's just like, Earl, what do I do? I don't know, do something. So he pulls out the AR-15, and he's like trying to shoot the ground. Boom, 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 boom. Nothing's working, right? And then all of a sudden, they get towards to a cliff, and then you think, oh shit, it's gonna fall through like the last one and the first one. Nope. Stop. And then that's when the Graboid turns around and starts still pulling him. And then Earl's like, oh shit. And just like in the first one, Earl, he fucking loses his cowboy hat as it's pulling backwards. He sticks his head out and he's like, oh, shit, And I thought it was pretty cool. They did a lot of winks to the first one on this. As they're going back, Grady, he's screaming, rock, rock, he's going under it. Turn the wheel, turn, I'm trying. And he's like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. They go right through the rock, like up on top of it, and the chain, it snaps right off. And then that's when Earl comes out. He's like, oh shit, no damage to the truck. All right, we're doing pretty good. And Grady's like, oh shit, that's gonna be my first ride. Doesn't anything get you down? No, I have a sunny disposition. And then he's like, oh yeah? Well, what does this do for your disposition? Typical 90s humor, But it was kind of funny because all of a sudden he calls them over, and then they look at the monitor and it shows them in the center. And it shows all these fucking Graboids coming. And then they're driving away, like going back and forth so the Graboids can't catch them. And they're all like, we're gonna need some help. Help? Who's gonna be able to help us with this? And this is where it gets into my favorite fucking part. Of course, I had to use this for the trailer announcement for y'all, because Bert is one of my favorite characters out of this whole franchise. He kept the franchise going. And it shows there's a picture of him and Reba McEntire, or him and Heather, I guess you could say. And it shows like all their gun trophies. Some of the guns are missing. Then all of a sudden it shows him watching like World War II TV shows or a documentary or something. And he's sitting there all in his lazy outfit and everything, eating chips. He gets a phone call from Earl. And he tells him, hey, Bert, it's Earl. Now, this is going to sound kind of funny, but I'm on a radio phone. It's the only way we can call out from here. He's like, Earl. Oh, Earl. Mutes the TV. I haven't seen you in a while. Well, I haven't seen you. How you been? You been laying low? He's like, laying low? Oh, no, negative. No, I've been too busy with projects. Oh, okay. Well, how's Heather? And then, that's when he's like, oh, well, she's still visiting her sister and everything like that. And, he kind of explained that they had marital problems because of the fact that, she got mad at him thinking that he couldn't live through life without the threat of global world domination or, World War III coming. Because in the first one, you gotta remember, that was taking place in 1990. You still had the Soviet Union, and, Bert is this old school, like, Second Amendment's right kind of guy. He loves his guns and everything like that. And then, as he's telling his problems to Earl, then he just kind of brushes it off. And he's like, yeah, I'm glad that she caught me. I was so busy running all around. It's amazing she caught me at this time. And then what's funny is that the camera zooms back, and then it shows the head of the Graboid that came in through his basement. And I was like, oh, shit. And it shows even that the hole where they came through, they patched it all up with obviously different colored bricks. So I thought it was another cool little wink on that. And then that's when Earl tells him, well, you see, I'm down here in Mexico, and I'm kind of in a sort of situation. Situation, huh? What kind of situation? And he pulls up and he's like, a Graboid kind of situation. Then Bert just jumps the fuck up and he's like, oh shit! It was kind of a cool scene. Then eventually it shows that they're all back at the refinery, they're all eating lunch and everything like that. And then Kate's doing research because I guess she's the scientist out there in the oil refinery plant. And, you know, she's looking at this rock, and then she's like, oh my God! And everyone's like, what? You know, then she's like, come look at this. This is actually might be a spike from one of the Graboids. And she goes, this is Precambrian rock. And they're all like, okay. they didn't know, you know, that shit was funny. And she goes, Precambrian rock, you know, it's older than the dinosaurs. You know, it's like one of the first type of life on this planet. And then, you know, Earl's like, so they're from Earth? And she goes, well, yeah, Precambrian rock. And he's like, damn, I was not there from outer space.
Oh, he's not there from outer space.
You know, another weight to the first one. This is why I said that this film is so great, because it continues a lot of the story from the first one and carries over. Part 3 and some of the other sequels did, but not as much as 2. And so anyways, as they're eating, you know, then you see Pedro, he's looking at the monitor, and then, you know, he starts screaming, Mita! You know, because he's saying, look, like, there's a big-ass, like, something coming. And they all gear up, you know, with their rifles and shit. And they're looking out, and then all of a sudden they see this big-ass truck, and they're like, nope, something more dangerous. And that's when fucking Bert rolls up in this, you know, this deuce truck. And for those of you that don't know what a deuce truck is, it's basically like one of those old-school armored trucks. It has, like, the dual wheelies and shit, and it has, like, 6 wheels, complete off-roader. I mean, it's old-school military, right? He pulls up and everything, and everyone's like, holy shit, you know, hey, I didn't think you'd make it. So Bert, he's like, oh, yeah, you know, I'd go crazy if I wasn't here. And then, you know, it shows that he opens up his trunk and shows what he's hauling. He's like, oh, yeah, you know, I got some C4, thermite, you know, makes my, you know, bombs at home look like cherry bombs. You know, and then that's when he meets Grady and everybody else and Kate and everything. And then that's when he starts telling them, like, hey, you know, I got you some rifles here. And they're all like, well, we're not going rabbit hunts, they're elephant guns, you know? And I thought it was pretty cool because they brought back the whole aspect of the elephant gun, thinking that it's going to penetrate through everything and all that shit. And, you know, it did work in the first one, so that's why he was assuming that in the second one it was going to work. But little did they know what was going to happen, right? And then that's when Grady, he starts asking, so, what, Mrs. Gummer didn't want to come? And Earl's like, here, you unload all this stuff, you know, and he goes to the side and he starts talking to Bert. And then, you know, he tells Bert, hey, I want to thank you for coming, you know, we're really in the shit here. And Bert's like, hey, don't mention it, you know, if I didn't get out of the house, I was going to go crazy. And then, you know, he looks at him and then he says, that is not coming back. And he goes, what? He goes, yeah, you know, she called me up and asked for the HK-91. And he's like, ooh. And if you don't know what HK-91 is, it is an amazing gun. It's like the gold prestige, like gold standard of high-end guns. And so, you know, it obviously stung Bert. But it's good to get out of the house and go Graboid hunting, you know? And then that's when they go back and he starts showing off all of his gear and everything. Then he shows his 50 caliber BMG gun. And, you know, 50 caliber BMG, them bullets are like, woo, fucking huge because it's a tank ammo, right? You put a new shine on the word overkill. And he's like, well, when you need it and don't have it, you'll sing another tune. Then they both pull out to the country and meet up side by side, you know, discussing where to meet. Like, oh, you take east, I take west. And then Bert's like, what the hell you eating? You eating crackers? You shouldn't eat that shit. And then he's like, I already gave up smoking, Bert, so what else do you want? He's like, have an MRE. A what? A meal, ready to eat. You know, and he's telling them all this shit like, hey,
meal,
you know, these are freeze-dried food. You know, foil seal, they'll last forever, up to 10 years. I thought it was fucking funny, you know, because it was, like I said, it continued on a lot of stuff from the first one. And it shows Bert's side, how he's all excited to go Graboid hunting. So it shows how he's doing basically the same method that Earl was doing, you know, driving the little RC car and everything. And then he's, you know, documenting it and all that. And, you know, he's like, I put 4 pounds of C4, let's see if he takes it. And he's all recording himself and shit with the camera. And, you know, the funny thing is, he wasn't driving a RC car, it was like an RC tank, you know, it had to be because it was Bert, right? And all of a sudden, you know, when the Graboid takes it, and all of a sudden he's like, all right, I'm ready, boom! And what he didn't realize, he put 4 pounds of fucking C4. It was so much, you know, there was more dirt than there was Graboid. And so he was telling himself, well, a little memo to myself, 4 pounds of C4 might be, and, you know, the little rock hits him in the head, a little excessive. And Bert being Bert, you know, he had to go on the radio and he's like, hey, I just got one. And they're all like, well, yeah, we heard it clear way over here. He's like, he had the damnest thing too, had a chain in his mouth. Brady's like, hey, you stole ours. He's like, well, I didn't see your name on it, son. Then all of a sudden, you know, they start talking shit. And then they start seeing that there's a Graboid, you know, popping up on their reader. And so they're like, oh shit, why is it going away from us? And they're like, I don't know, we shouldn't follow it. And then what do? They actually follow it. And they follow it all up to, you know, up to this hill. And they're all like, well, this is kind of weird, you know. And Earl's like, well, they like to dig traps. They like to evolve. They like to change. We don't know what the hell's going to happen, but they get smarter. I told you. You know? And eventually when they're driving up, they see a Graboid pops up, and then it fucking, like, lands on the truck. They're like, oh, shit. Grinding all the gears and shit, pull back, and then they fall off the ledge of this rock, and then they crash. And he's like, fuck, we got to get Bert's gun. And it starts making this crazy-ass, like, screaming sound. And it's like, holy shit, what the hell's happening? And as they're still stuck in the truck, they're all like, oh shit, where the hell is he? He'd be all over us on right now. And you know, Earl's like, I don't know, but that's a new one on me. And so they get all their gear and everything. They go behind this rock, and then they see that it's just sitting there. So they set up an RC car, and they start fucking with it, like hitting right off on the Graboid, thinking it would take the bait. And it didn't, so Grady's like, alright, you know, and then he puts down the control. So Grady jumps over the rock, and he goes and slaps his Graboid, and he jumps right back, and then I was like, what the hell are you doing? You know, and they're freaking out, because they don't know if this Graboid's going to attack or anything. And then this Graboid's, I guess you could say it's like hyperventilating, just like, and they don't know what the hell's going on. They're all like, holy shit, we caught a live one, that's $100,000. So they're all stoked and everything about it. And, you know, Earl's like, well, what are you going to do? You going to carry him back? We just wrecked the truck. So, you know, they go back to the truck, they get on the radio, they tell Kate, hey, Pedro has a flatbed, can you have Pedro come out here and bring us a flatbed? And she's like, yeah, I'll send him out there. So here at this time, it becomes nightfall, and, you know, they start hearing all these boom, bang, boom, you know, because Bert was still going out there, you know, hunting Graboids, and, you know, he's calling on the walkie. He's like, guys, doing a little night fishing, caught 3 of them on a cluster charge. How about that? You know, Earl's like, well, we're not keeping score. It's not a competition. And he's like, oh, who's competing? And Grady gets on the radio. He goes, well, son, it's not because we just caught ourselves a live one. And then Bert's like, a live one? How did you? And then he's like, well, that's trade secret, Bert. Happy hunting.
That's just a little trade secret. Happy hunting, Bert.
And as they're, you know, laughing about it, joking, all of a sudden now the screams are starting to get louder for this fucking Graboid. It's just screaming off the fucking hinge. And then it shows the Graboid like going up and down and like shaking. And that's when Grady's like, we should go check on it. Earl's like, fuck no, we're not gonna go check on it. He goes, come on, man, we gotta protect our investment. And the screams are getting louder and louder. And finally they said, all right, fuck it, let's go. So they grab all their gear, their shotguns and everything like that. And as they go up there to go look, this fucking Graboid's torn to pieces. Like the whole inside, just the side of it's just, there was sacks and everything that came out, and they're all like, holy shit, did a coyote eat it? They're all like, what, in 2 minutes? He's like, well, something happened to it, you know, because there's nothing inside. But then Earl's like, well, maybe they changed into something else, like a butterfly, you know, where it pops out of a cocoon. And he's like, only thing that didn't come out was probably no sweet little butterfly, you know? 90s cliches, man. That shit was funny. And as he's walking away, he's like, damn, words, they never cut you any slack. After all that, they go back to their truck. They try to get on the radio, and the radio's acting up. And they're all like, fuck, we can't get a hold of anybody. Then they see that Pedro comes up with his truck, and he stops. And they're like a mile away from each other. And they're all like, well, he stopped. And he's like, well, maybe he has to take a leak. And then I guess it's like, it replays like 5 minutes later, and he's like, damn, that's a long leak. So Earl gets impatient. Pedro! And he's like, well, shit, you know, we got to go over there and check on him and see what's going on. And Earl's like, you want us to walk across open land a mile deep out there? I'm not stepping a foot away from this shit. He's like, well, come on, there's nothing out here, so we should go. And he tells him, right now, the time is good, so let's go. And then, then it shows that they're actually walking across the land, and, you know, it shows that Grady, he's carrying all the gear, and, you know, he's like, well, you can carry some of this stuff. You know, and Earl, he's holding the monitor, he goes, I got what I want. That shit was funny, you know? They walk up to the tow truck, and they see the tow truck, like, in horror because of the fact that it's all tore the fuck up. Like the engine's all shredded and everything like that. And they see these hands on the back. And they're all like, oh shit, Pedro's back there. So Grady goes in the back, and then he's like, oh God. And then it's, you know, it's basically torn arm. Like, 2 hands that were gripping that were fucking bitten clean off. And then Earl runs back there, and he goes, it's a whole new ball game. Goddamn ball game. Then Grady's like, well, you know what to do, right? And then he looks at him, he goes, I don't know shit. And they see that there's a radio tower nearby. And they say, come on, we gotta go to that radio tower. There's gotta be something out there. It's a radio fucking tower. They'll have something. And as they're hiking to the radio tower, then it shows Bert where he's driving around in his truck. And then, you know, he's filming himself, and he's like, 2,400 hours, and still haven't heard a word or a sign from Earl, Grady, or anybody at HQ, and haven't seen any of these Graboids. and I saw one Graboid and it was going away. Where the hell can they have gone? Can they not hear my sound of my deuce-and-a-half mil-spec truck? I do not have the answer at this time. And he clicks it off because he has a fucking flashlight. It's dark at this time. Then all of a sudden, you know, Grady and Earl, they get up to the radio tower. And they see it's all torn up, and they're like, what the fuck? These things, man. And then, you know, he starts panicking, and then Earl's like, see? Shut the fuck up. I told you. They get smarter. And as they're looking around, they see that there's a car there. And they're like, look, oh shit. So they run up to the car, and then Grady tells Earl, I can hotwire the damn thing. He breaks the glass and everything, and Earl just opens the door. And he's like, you know, they try to start it, hotwire it, and all of a sudden they start hearing this noise. So they get behind their car, and that's when they're like, what the hell is that? Well, we don't know. And all of a sudden it's getting louder, and they already have their guns drawn and shit. And they're going higher and higher. They're like, how big is this thing? And what popped out was like the newer version of the Graboid. And it's like, what the hell? How does an 8-foot worm turn into that little thing? And it's crazy because I guess they had like 3 or 4 of them per sack or per Graboid. And they basically show that they're these tiny little runt monsters. And Earl tells Grady, he goes, shh, you can probably hear us, quiet. And then all of a sudden this fucking Shrieker looking monster, well, eventually you find out later on they're named Shriekers. And he turns around and then he looks at them. Then this like thing pops out of their head and he's like staring at them. And they're like, what the hell is this? And all of a sudden it starts screaming and starts running after him. And he goes, shit, it hurt us. So they're shooting, boom, boom, boom. And you hear it go, wow. So they finally got it down and they're like, we got it. They go and look at it and they're like, man, got no eyes like the big ones. And they're talking over about, you know, taking it back to the refinery. And Earl's like, hell no, we're not taking this back to the refinery. And they start hearing more of them. So they jump in the car, and then Earl's like, let's go! Let's go! You know, they're panicking and shit. He starts it up. And then they drive off as more Shriekers come. Then he gets back to Bert, where, you know, he's driving all around, and then, you know, he stops for a second, and then he pulls out the map, and he's looking on his flashlight, and he hears this noise on his truck, you know, doom, doom, on the sides. He pulls down the map, and he sees that, you know, the Shriekers have gone after him, and they start screaming, ah! On all sides. And then it goes black, and it's like, oh shit, they got fucking Bert, no way! You know, and that's the suspense that I loved on this, because you think that they got Bert. Or did they, right? And, you know, watching this film for the first time when it came out, I was just like, oh, fuck, man, of course they're gonna have to go and get Bert, you know? And then eventually it shows that Kate's back at the refinery. She's trying to call everybody on the walkie. Nobody's picking up. And then all of a sudden, Julio, you know, he pops through a window, and he's like, hey, you know, have you heard from anybody? She's like, no. He goes, all right, I'm gonna go to the radio station to go check out. And then all of a sudden, the Shrieker comes and fucking bites his leg off, and he's like screaming, and Kate's trying to pull him through the window, and the Graboid pulls him back down, and they fucking eat him. At that same time, you know, she's freaking out. She runs, she gets one of the hammers or one of the tools or something. And then it shows that, you know, Earl and Grady, they pull up, and they see, you know, the Shrieker is still eating them. And they're all like, get him, boom! That son of a bitch! They open the door, and then that's when they meet up with Kate. And then, you know, they update Kate on everything. They're all like, well, did you see Pedro? Pedro? No, he's dead too. They got him. And, you know, that's when they said, okay, we got to get going. So they were going to leave the refinery. And, you know, as they start to, you know, go outside the door, all of a sudden they see that there is another Shrieker on top of the engine just eating it all up. They're all like, oh, shit, not again. And, you know, they're all pissed off because they're like, fuck, you know, because now they're stuck there. And obviously they shoot it and they kill it in one shot. They get back inside the refinery and they start talking like, okay, well, you know, how do these things change? How do they evolve? And they don't know, you know, so we're finding out as audience, like, how did this shit evolve, right? And so as they're talking, they start saying, okay, well, there was 3 sacks per worm. And Kate said, you killed all Graboids except 8. So that would make, you know, and then they're trying to do the math in their head. 24 of those things left. And Kate's like, well, how many did you kill? He goes, well, 1 at the tower, and 1 outside, and 1 on top of the car. And she goes, that's it? Earl looks at her and he goes, well, I'm sorry. And she's like, well, no. And then that's when they start hearing noises and everything rattling. Grady's like, oh, no, not another one. And everything's starting to shake. And then they see that it's actually Bert's truck. And they're all like, yes, they didn't get him. And then as he gets closer, they're all like, well, shit, I think they did get him. Because it has all these parts of the freaking Shriekers and everything on him. And the whole truck is all tore the fuck up. And as he pulls up, you know, they run up to Bert and they're all like, Bert, you good? And, you know, he takes off his glasses all jacked up and he puts it in his shirt pocket and it falls right through. And he goes, you know, I feel I was denied. Need to know information.
Need to know.
They're all like, well, what the hell happened, Bert? They're all like, you know, we tried to contact you, but they knocked out the radio tower. And, you know, they're asking, well, what happened? They're all like, well, after I couldn't get anybody, on the radio, protocol states to go back to HQ. On the way back, he goes, I was ambushed by all of them. Must have been a couple dozen of these things. And, he's talking about how he did head-to-head combat and everything. And he goes, then finally I said, I popped in the sixth wheel and ran them all down. And then he pulls out his 1911s. I am completely out of ammo. And he falls down to his knees. That's never happened before. And I laugh at that because of the fact that, if you know Bert for the first film, he's always prepared, and then you find out in this one, he's not as prepared because, here he thinks that he's going to go after, Graboids, and they evolved on them, and they changed. And so that's when they said, okay, well, let's get the truck inside the refinery. And as they did, they, that's when he explained to them, well, that thought wasn't lost on me, that we needed to save one to research, right? And he had one of them stunned. I guess he ran him over but didn't kill it. And he wrapped it up in twine around his mouth and everything with 1,000-pound line. And, that's when they pulled up in the refinery. And then, Earl Grady, they're trying to pull it down and it like huffs and puffs at him. And they're like, whoa! He's like, don't let him spook you. That line is 1,000-pound tested. And then they're like, okay, grab him. And it's like, when you try to grab a big-ass dog and you try to put him in the car in the bath, it's just like fighting you. That's what it looked like. So they were fighting with it to get inside the refinery. And then as they go in, all of a sudden you hear... There was one that he ran over that still survived, and it sticks out this tongue, and it's like, grabbing all over. It grabs Bert's MREs, and it starts eating it. But then as they're inside, researching this one Shrieker, they find out that it's not sound that it hunts. They figured out that it's, picks up on heat. And, Bert figured that out because he tried to do sounds. He tried to do, movement and everything. Eventually, when he shows his hands, that's when the Shrieker starts going wild. And then he goes, knew it, I knew it. They don't hunt by sound. They don't hear us. They actually hunt by heat. And he goes, you see that thing that lifts up? That has to be their heat seeker. And they figured out that eventually that it starts screaming. And it's locked up in a cage going fucking crazy. And so eventually they're like, okay, well, this is kind of weird. And then they see that it has a long-ass tongue. And it doesn't have, like, tentacles like the Graboids do. So they decide to feed it one of Bert's MREs. It eats it and it starts getting sick. And then they're all like, oh, you made it sick. And they're going back and forth. Well, no, Bert, your nasty-ass food made it sick. Eventually it shows that it eats it and then it's like going, making these sounds. And all of a sudden it opened its jaw all the fucking way and going, like it was throwing up. But it actually reproduced another one. And it was like, holy shit, So there was a second Shrieker that popped out because they figured out that as much as they eat, that's how they reproduce. They reproduce without sex. And they don't make eggs or anything like that. And so that's when they said, okay, we better get going. We better get going. And comes to find out, as Kate was going to go get a camera and record everything, another Shrieker pops out of the window. Earl stabs it with a hammer. It was a callback like in the original. And that's when, Earl looks into the refinery and then he's like, they got to your damn superfood, Bert. And so they try to run out and they're like, we got to close the refinery. And then they try to close it and there's all the Shriekers outside. And, they try to run to this building. And this building was only half done, just the front. And they're like, this is not going to work. They close the door. Shit. They're in a half building. And then that's when they're like, okay, well, they can't find us. We got to find a way to get around. And so they're trying to find a car to get around. So they had spare doors, and they were walking around with it, and Kate's telling them, okay, we'll go over here because we'll find Julio's truck. And then as they get over there, they see that there's one hiding over there in the corner, and they tell Bert, we can't get it, we can't get around it, there's no way around it. And then Bert's like, well, how far is it? Well, about like 50 yards, maybe a little bit more, and he's like, all right. He pulls out his gun, the one that he was talking about, the 50 cal BMG, and he loads it up, and he's like, cover your ears. And, he's looking at it, and all of a sudden, the Shrieker looks at him, and then boom! He fucking blows it away, splits it in half. They're all like, whoa, you smoked his ass. Doing what I can with what I got. What they didn't realize is that a 50 cal BMG, that will go through everything. And basically, that's what it did. It went through the Graboid, through a cement wall, through all these, different things that they had there, and then it actually eventually hit the engine, and it blew up the engine. It was bleeding out, coolant and oil, and they're like, yeah, we're dead. He's like, well, I didn't know. I wanted maximum penetration. We're supposed to be hunting Graboids. And, Earl's like, well, you got it. And as they're trying to go around, they see that all the fucking Shriekers are out. So, eventually it shows that Grady, he climbs on top of one of the oil towers. Bert's like, damn, throws his gun on the ground, jumps on top of a freaking, bulldozer, like in the mouth of it. Then Kate and Earl, they go inside the cantina, and it's breaking through the door. So, they came up with the idea of, hey, let's heat up some jeans and throw it on the clothesline, and then that way we'll run out. And that's what they did, because they're heat seekers. They hunt by heat. And as that happens, they get on top of the oil tower, and they're all like, oh, we all made it safe. And they're all like, oh, shit, where's Bert? And Grady's like, oh, they're not going to mess with Bert. He should be fine. So they have 3 Shriekers right there screaming because they can't fight him. And he's like, oh, I'm just dandy. Because he's all tucked in and everything. And he's like, so what do we do now? And eventually, that's when they just kind of lounge around until the Shriekers got smart and they started stacking themselves up, so they would jump one and then jump another and then back and forth, and they were like, oh shit, they're starting to climb, because they got smart. They started to evolve again. And then, Bert, he can't see what's going on, so then, he pulls out his knife and it's shiny, he can see through it, and he's looking through it and he's like, oh, smart little bastards. And they're almost up to the top of this tower, trying to get Earl, Grady, and Kate. And then eventually, you see that Bert, he jumps out and he goes, hey, you want 180 pounds of lean meat? Come on, and he pisses all the Shriekers off, and then he's running all around, jumps into the warehouse, closes one door, gets in the front, closes it, and they're all like, problem solved, right? And as they're laughing and talking shit, then it comes to find out that inside the refinery, they had nothing but, foods and shit, and they're all like, I know this, dulce, sweet snack food, rice flour, and they're all like, oh shit, and so they're replicating like crazy inside. Earl comes up with this idea where he's like, hey, there's a fire extinguisher, alright, so spray me in there, and then, Bert didn't get the point. Well, what's the point? If I can go in there cold and they don't see me, I can grab some bombs. And they're like, okay, I like this idea. They tried to do rock, paper, scissors. Earl lost. He's like, no, I win. And he's like, what? So, he takes Grady's sweater, wears it on his head. They spray him down with the CO2. And he gets in there. And then, he's flipping the fuck out like, whoa. Because, you see a bunch of them all over. And they're using their heat seekers, trying to look at him and everything. But they can't see him because he's cold. Eventually, they get up on the top. And they're seeing through a window. And they're like, Earl, step on it. You're starting to melt. And as Earl, barely gets in the truck and he looks for some bombs, they start seeing him and they start going crazy and ape shit. So he grabs, I guess, like a digital bomb and he gets on top of it. He sets it for whatever. It looked like it was like 5-10 minutes. And then all of a sudden he throws it in there like, fuck. And then all of a sudden he swings off the light, try to get to the window because they had a rope. And, well, it wasn't a rope. They had a fire hose that they used and they pulled it out and it was too short. So Bert just cut it. And they tied it all around them. They pulled Earl up, and Earl's like, go, run, you need to run. I set a bomb. And, Bert's still down at the bottom, and, they're running off the roof, and they go down. And then, Bert's like, what happened? What happened? And then Earl's like, I don't know, man. I just set some bombs through in your truck. And then Bert's like, you what? He goes, that's 2.5 tons of explosive. And he goes, that's not enough? Tell me that's not enough. And then he's like, no, just, never mind. It's going to be big. And, they run to, one room. Well, on one of the buildings on the side, and they're all like, no, get farther. It's going to be big. And they're all like, is he serious? Well, Bert knows his bombs. So they're running. And the whole time as they're running, that's all Bert says. It's going to be big. And they get up to the edge where there's like a trench, because it was farmland. And they're like, okay, get down, stay down. This should be good. It's going to be big. And Grady starts fucking with him. Where he's like, is it going to be today? It's going to be today. Then Bert looks at him and he goes, Grady, get your ass down! And all of a sudden, it shows the refinery with all of them screaming. Boom! Blows up the whole fucking refinery. I mean, just big-ass chunks, and everybody, with a blast like that, it pushes them all back and everything. Everything's all blown up. They see parts of all the Shriekers and shit coming on them. And then eventually you find out that Kate and Earl, they have kind of like this thing together, because when they were on the water tower, they start talking about, this poster that he has, Miss October 1974. Comes to find out it was actually Kate. It was like, oh shit, So his true, I guess you could say his dream girl was her the whole time. Kind of 90s-ish, I guess. But in the end, there was a happy ending with them. And then Bert's like, some people think I'm crazy, being overprepared. But they never met any Precambrian life forms. And as they're walking towards the refinery, you can see that there's a big-ass hole. And they started laughing. They're all like, yeah, they're going to have to pay us for all those little ones, so we're going to make bank off of this. Well, we did blow up their refinery. And then the movie ends. And it was like, holy shit, that was a great fucking sequel, Personally, for me, I've always loved the Tremor franchise, the first one. And even if they did just a one and done with Tremors, that would have been great as it is, But the fact that us as horror fans, we all came together and actually demanded that they did a second one, and they did it. And the fact that they did it with, on a shoestring budget almost with $4 million. That's a lot of money now in today's money, and but $4 million to do all the props and the effects and everything. I mean, it adds up quick, And with that aspect, they brought back Burt Gummer character, Michael Gross, and they also brought back Fred Ward, who played Earl, which was Earl was one of your main characters in the original. Burt was more of a secondary main character in the original. But what was cool is that Michael Gross, he later on continued on with the franchise because he appeared in all the movies, all the sequels. And I thought that was pretty cool. And then it showed kind of a lot more depth to the story of the first one and what happened to everybody. So you find out that Val and Rhonda, they get married. Burt, he went through a divorce with his wife. Earl, all of his money, he spent it. And, it was a continuation of it, which I thought was really good in the story. Because most sequels now these days, before the 2000s, I should say, what they would do, they would just continue on a different story with different characters. Or if the character returned, and especially in horror films, if they return from a sequel to another sequel, they'd be in the film 5 minutes and killed off super quick, which I don't know why the hell they started that trend, but they did, and that's when Tremors 2 played it on you with the fact that Burt was being ambushed by all these Shriekers. And, when you find out that he actually survived it, it was like, holy shit, okay, so he's going to be somewhat part of the heart of the franchise in a way. But I thought what was cool about this film is that the design that they had for the Shriekers, it just matched perfectly with how the Graboids look with their mouth opening and things like that. Interesting note though on this, the company that designed them, they designed actually 2 different versions of the Shriekers. And what they decided to do is that they decided for the studio to decide, okay, well, which Shrieker do you want? We made this one over here and we made this one. Well, the one that they used obviously ended up in Tremors 2. The one that they didn't use ended up in Starship Troopers as like one of those monsters and shit in it. And I was like, holy shit, So Tremors kind of has like a way with Starship Troopers, and it kind of expanded on different things. And Starship Troopers, I mean, that's a franchise of its own. They did one good movie, and then they went most of it to like VHS, DVD. But I thought it was interesting that they actually did 2 different designs for the Shriekers. One of my other favorite cool notes to note about Tremors 2, since we're having such a great fucking time here at this Fiesta, was the fact that they filmed so many different various scenes on this that were deleted. Now, I don't know if they'll ever release those. I don't know if that footage is lost. But some of the deleted scenes show that actually Burt, when he got attacked, they show that there was a part where he actually used his 1911s. He got out of the truck and ran them down. Like, they filmed that whole scene, which I thought was pretty cool. And then they had other scenes of, the Graboids actually moving around and with the Shriekers. But what's so cool about this film is that they reused a lot of the Graboids from the first film. They recycled them and fixed them, but then they built the Shriekers based off of the Graboids' mouth and how it looks, and I thought it was pretty cool how they did that. But what's cool about having all these extra scenes and deleted scenes is the fact that they actually edit this film and they wanted to appease the fans for it. That's why they shot so much of the footage. The problem is though, like Burt fighting the Shriekers, they said that it didn't look right because of the puppeteering and the green screen and stuff like that. They filmed, I believe there was 2 or 3 different endings to how this film ended. And when they tested it with the audience, all the audience, they were going back and forth with it. So they actually made this film with test audience to make sure that this film was going to be great for the fans. And boy, did they knock it out of the park with that. The only thing that sucked though is that they couldn't decide if they wanted to release this in theaters or if they were going to release it straight to VHS at the time. And, at the time, horror films, they were really kind of dying down a lot. They mostly turned into thrillers because, you didn't have so much slashers between 1990 and 1995, 94. And, the thing that really changed that was obviously Scream. But during that time from 1990 to 1994, 95, that's where you had a lot of oddball films. And they went back on some sequels like this one. And some were great. Like Tremors 2 was great as a sequel. Other sequels, it's arguable. But Tremors 2 was one of the good highlights of it. And they meant to release it in 1994. But finally when they just said, you know what? Some audience liked it, some didn't. And what we're going to do just to save money is just release it to VHS. And I remember seeing this film for the first time at my local video store, Fresno Video. When I saw it, I go, holy shit, they made a Tremors 2? We need to rent that. And we waited until Tuesday because then, they had that deal of like 5 movies, 5 days, $5. And it was, whether it was new or old, you can rent them and stuff. Man, we wore the shit out of that VHS tape. But one of the craziest things to note, though, is that Tremors 2 was going to be a completely different film. And doing research for this episode, originally it was going to be that they had $17 million. They were going to have Reba McEntire come, and they were going to have Kevin Bacon come back. And what they were going to do is change the whole story to where it takes place in Australia. And they were going to do something extravagant and big with it. But when Kevin Bacon and Reba McEntire, didn't come on board with it, they cut down the budget from $17 million to $4 million. What's interesting to note, though, is that the new Tremors that's recently coming out, I believe it's Tremors 7, where it's taking place like on an island and things like that. A lot of that is going to take place from the original Tremors 2 script, which I thought, holy shit, this is going to be pretty cool. The way that they originally were going to plan it was how they're doing it for Tremors 7. So if Tremors 7 comes out and you actually see it, that was actually the original plot for Tremors 2. But thank y'all for tuning in for this Fiesta of episode 59, Tremors 2 Aftershock, and I will catch y'all next time, as always.
Bow down to the